Welcome to the Naked Dialogue podcast. I wanted to ask you, what is creative consciousness model that you've created?
Okay. Okay. So it's like uh, I go to lots of colleges. A lot of engineering colleges and all kinds of universities and colleges to give lectures. And very often I used to ask them, okay, who are creative people here? And I realized that even in engineering IITs, only five or six boys will raise their hands, and almost all the girls would raise their hands. So, in an auditorium of say 1100 people or 1500 people, only 7 or 10 people would raise their hands saying, I'm creative. And you can also experiment this. You, in a party with your friends, you say, okay, how many people are creative? And very few people would raise hands. And you ask them what makes you creative, then somebody would say, I paint, I sing, or I'm a writer. So, what has happened is with the formal education, somewhere we have convinced people that art means creative. Anything which is non art is not creative. So, an engineer who builds a bridge is not creative. So, somebody who makes wonderful roads is not creative. Okay, so creativity has been assigned only to very skilled jobs. But in reality, if you see, singing is just a skill. Okay, seven notes and you master that art. Painting is about strokes. It can be cataloged, it can be classified. Okay, this stroke, that stroke, that stroke. Writing also, I'm not talking about the soul of writing, but writing also is a craft. Acting itself is a skill, 100% skill. After making so many movies, I'm convinced. So I said, why is it so? And I started researching it. So in last 4 5 years, then I realized that, have you heard of Maslow's
Hierarchy of needs,
pyramid
yes, yeah.
of hierarchy?
Yeah.
Um, so I studied that. I know it very well. But then I realized similarly there are various levels of consciousness in this world. Some people are at a security consciousness. Okay, security consciousness means we came from ice age, so we want warmth. So you need food, warmth, and sex. These three things. And you'll find most of this world is centered around that consciousness. People are just worried about food, warmth, and sex. Correct? Three things. Then you move up and you sort of bond with each other, and you are in a party and you are 100 people, you make friends with them and you make a small tribe of yours. Okay? And this is where most of the world is, at the tribal consciousness. You are not a part of tribe, you live alone, but still you follow the tribe. So tribe is what? Tribe simply means, tribal consciousness means that the other tribe is evil.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Right? The
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
tribe is evil, and we are the best. And you invent gods. Okay, this is where you invent. At security level, you don't invent gods. That's why a homeless person has no god. Poor people don't have gods. Okay, so at the tribal level, we create these gods. Okay, which nobody knows where they came from, why do they exist. There's no reasoning. Yes, you can intellectualize it, and then they believe in superstitions.
Yeah. Stereotypes and
Yeah,
superstition. Yeah.
and superstitions. So that is where most of the world is. Then slowly you move from there, then ego consciousness, then mother nature, then civilizational consciousness. People who work, America works a lot about civilizational consciousness. Civilization means building roads, bridges, this, and the whole consciousness is about progress, materialism, individualism, stuff like that. Then I said, when a child is born, what are the original faculties which God has given, if there is a God, okay, or whatever, in the creation? What is child born with? What are the facilities? Child can't walk, child can't talk, child can't feed himself or herself, child can't do anything, child has no consciousness of sex, okay, child doesn't know who's my mother, who's my father.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
also true. Yeah.
he starts believing in mother, the concept of mother, because that's the only face he's seeing all the times. Okay, if I use he, it's got nothing to do with gender because I'm a man, that's why he comes naturally to me. So that's the face, okay, child is all the time seeing and gets the warmth. But what we do is, so child is born with two things which gives what makes us human beings. Number one, the power to breathe, that's why you are alive, and then power to create. That's what makes us human beings. Okay, imagine human beings without language. All your thoughts are coming from language. Without language, there is no thought.
Yes.
Is there? You are a student of psychology. I'm asking you.
I don't think so. No, if anything, there's instincts which you talked about at the most primitive level.
Anything after that, language is required.
Language is required to communicate. So from going from primitive to social needs, you need language in order to make like a collective civilization. Be
Yeah.
in the tribal consciousness, as
Yeah.
you were talking. Yes.
So animals also communicate. It's not that they do not communicate. Like monkeys, when they look up in the sky and make a certain sound, it means a big bird is coming. Eagle is coming. So all of them go and hide in the grass. And when they look in the front and then they make certain sound, means a tiger or something is coming. Then they climb the trees. So they communicate with each other. Okay, but they don't have language. They cannot describe whether tiger is coming fast or slow, whether tiger is ferocious or it's a tame tiger. They cannot say that tiger is the king of the forest, right? So they can't imagine. They cannot create stories around it. We do.
We do. Yeah.
Why? We do because we can imagine. We have a faculty which we can imagine.
Yes.
And with imagination, we created language. Okay, with language, we have created philosophy, we have created democracy, we have created human rights, equality. So many good things we have created, and we have also created a tyranny, we have created dictatorship, we have created all kinds of things. So it's all because of our creativity. We are meant to create. Okay, so these are the only two things. And that's why you see a child, when a child you leave him alone, absolutely alone in a dark room, child would cry for some time, okay, would cry, would get scared, and within no time would start dismantling things, playing around with things. Then the child would create certain characters and slowly will create a world of his or her own. Okay, a world which doesn't exist.
The imaginary.
Yeah, the imaginary world.
Yeah.
That imagination is creativity because from there you create things. So all creations are done twice, first in your mind and then later on. And that is the consciousness where you are never destructive, never ever destructive, because in imagination you don't imagine that you're going to destroy the world. Nobody does that. You think of atom bomb and then people use atom bomb to destroy the world.
Oh yeah. True.
Right?
Yeah.
So we are born with creativity. There is a NASA research where they surveyed a whole lot of children, 5-year-old children, and 98% of them were creative genius. Only 2% because they were autistic or some kind of they were challenged. That's why they were not creative genius. Then they interviewed the same set of children when they became 10 years old. Now the figures came down to about 50% were creative genius and 50% were not. And then when they were 15 years, again they surveyed them. It's a NASA research, it's published peer-reviewed research. So, and by this time only 30% were creative genius. Pardon me for 2-3% here and there. And then again they surveyed these children when they were 20 years old. Guess what was the figure of creative genius?
Maybe the kids did not perform that well.
It reversed. Only
Okay.
2% remained creative genius, 98% became creatively duffers. Why? Because our education system destroys creativity.
I agree there. Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because it works on template. And education system was created to create soldiers.
Wow. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that there's a discipline, uniform, obeying, morning prayers, classes, timing, curriculum,
Like
all.
scheduling of civilization.
So all military
True.
things. And now we don't need soldiers, we need corporate slaves. So everybody is trained in those things. No school today teaches how to create, how to live, how to love, the three most important things in life. Nobody teaches that,
Nobody.
right?
It's only like you know what you call in Hindi ratification,
Yeah, yeah.
basically.
Yeah, so all over the world. And that's why we have destroyed this consciousness which we naturally are part of. Hundreds of children you bring from any place, get from Israel, get from China, get from Egypt, get from India, get from any financial background, any cultural background, put them together in a room, all of them will start creating something.
Yes, they will.
They'll create new games, they'll create new wall paintings. They will pluck all the flowers, take the petals out, and then they will rearrange them in a new form or new something. They are always inquiring, experimenting, learning,
Optimizing.
optimizing. But as we grow older, we say this is right, this tribe is good, that tribe is bad. So this is what creative consciousness is. Okay, so what I realize that young people are primarily are not creative. They don't believe that they can create. So ask anybody on the street, what do you do? Who are you? They'll say, I'm an engineer. That's just a role you are playing in your life. Like you are also a father, like a son, you are a brother. That's one of the roles. But overall, we are human beings, means we are creative people. We can create anything.
True. By default, we are meant for creation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just want to create that awareness, want to bring as many people back to understanding what creative consciousness is.
No, it's a wonderful model. Like I see a lot of parallels with the hierarchy of needs as well that you mentioned. So the primitive consciousness parallel to primitive needs, the social needs parallel to the tribal consciousness, and then you would say at the top is creative consciousness.
Yeah, at the top. Yeah.
True. No, and
What in Indian philosophy they call spirituality. But spirituality is so difficult for people to understand because they think it's you have to go somewhere and meditate. So creative consciousness is very simple. Let me define it for you. When you do something with full awareness, it's creative consciousness. So a carpenter making a chair with full consciousness or full awareness is creatively conscious.
Creatively conscious. No, it's a very cohesive model as well. Because you know what people would often say about intelligence. Like people ask, what is intelligence? And a lot of times people would say it's your capacity to like contain and attain information, but it's not.
No.
In true intelligence is your capacity to create, actually.
Yeah.
Because if you cannot create, by default, you won't be a Homo sapien.
Yeah.
Because the reason why we're Homo sapiens is because we're intelligent. Because we were intelligent than the other Homo species and everything else. Also, like, within this triad, even within Hindu philosophy, even though it seems very dense, that there's a darshan, which is this insight, and Vedanta, which is this philosophy of ontology, so how life is, being, and what reality and metaphysics essentially is. So even in that triad, we see like Advaita on top. And I think that was propagated by Ramakrishna and Vivekananda and all of these people. So what do you think about him? Like, is there any Hindu philosophy like you tend to follow?
See, I write a lot about Hindu philosophy, but all these so-called Hindus hate my interpretation of philosophy, because the reason is I have not tried to. Okay, two things I did in last 7, 8, 9 years. One, I totally got out of jargons and templates and stuff like that. And second thing, I am totally out of classifications. Okay, I don't like things to be classified. Okay, this is Advaita, this is Dvaita, because there are people who were born at a certain time. They observed something, and you have different interpretations, and that's where creativity comes from. When you can look at the same thing from a different angle, that's creative. Otherwise, what you're doing, you're repeating somebody else's. Then it's like window shopping.
Yes,
True. And very often in this world, in this modern world, to look smart, to believe that yes, we are educated, because you spend most of your time going to school, college, into that regime like a soldier. You want the world to believe that you are educated. So what we do is we use a lot of references.
Yes.
Okay, this is what, if a religious person religious person will quote verse number so and so from Bible or Quran or Gita all the times. But if you're a truly religious person, Buddha never quoted anything.
Yeah.
Did he? Mahavir never quoted anything. Jesus never quoted anything. They were the truly religious people you believe in, you follow. They never quoted any text,
Exactly.
no scripture. They never even quoted that so and so said this.
They created.
Yeah, that's what I understood in Hindu philosophy. Hindu philosophy doesn't quote anything, it has no reference.
Yes.
It doesn't say refer to so and so, refer to so and so, and believe me because this is the evidence, that is the witness. So the whole thing is that nobody understands, and we are the only philosophy in the world which came with the concept of Anekantavad, which is the Jainism philosophy. Jains believe in that, which means there are multiple truths, there is no one truth.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And when you deny this, then you are violent.
Wow.
Violence is not, is misunderstood by people that Jains think that you should not kill animals. No, that's wrong. Similarly, suppose when you torture yourself, you're fasting. Okay, so somebody who's feeding people forcibly is also violent. A person who's denying food to his own body is also violent. Right? So anekant, your anek means many. So which means that there are many roots to truth. There are many truths in this world, and it's impossible for human beings to comprehend how many truths are there. So nobody can say this is true.
Yeah. There's no
Therefore-
capital T true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what you are saying is also true. What I am saying is also true.
True.
But when we start saying the same thing, then it's not true.
Ah, I see.
You got it?
Yeah.
If you say this is true because Vedas said this, then it's not true. It's
Yeah.
not your truth. You have not discovered anything.
You speak your own truth.
Yeah.
Creatively.
Right? So when you say Veda, somebody else saw that. So you are just repeating somebody else's words. So you don't know anything about truth. So get out of here. You know? So that's what I realized. So only thing which I believe in is, because I experience it, which is a mantra from a Upanishad, which is Tattvam Asi.
Tatvamasi.
Thou art that. Which means you are that. So your cell, every cell of your body has the same energy which is equal to the energy of the cosmos. And this is now has been proved by quantum physics, that the human cell has the same energy as the world. The water inside your body behaves in the same manner as the water of the world.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
Right? The air inside you behaves exactly. So we are cosmos. But with the education and what society teaches us, when a child is born, no child knows whether child is a Hindu or a Christian or Jew or whatever. But like we put stamps on a brand, Apple, Samsung, like that we put these without child's. Child never asked you what is God. Child is not asking you what is God. Okay, you are feeding into his mind what is God, what is God, what is God, and restricting a child's imagination and creative power.
True.
Okay, so that's why you have, once you believe Tattvamasi, which means you are that, we don't know who's that. Okay, so that infinity, when you think, oh my God, I'm part of infinity. So this, I can go anywhere, left, right, center, north, east, west. In fact, there is not only north, east, west, there can be another dimension. And then you explore, then you inquire, then you experiment with that. And that is creative consciousness.
Yeah, that's a really cohesive and really good model, because I also truly believe in creativity. I think there's a lot of philosophy in the world. There's the Western school, there's the Eastern school. But I feel like everyone creates their philosophy, like one creates their own narrative of life.
Yeah.
And you're correct in saying that we are born into the world, and within seconds we're given this identity, this label, from which country you are, what religion you will follow. Like everything is decided upon, which should not be essentially the way to go about if you want to be creative.
Yeah.
And also like during this sensory motor stage of a child's development, which is like 0 to 3 years, like the child is like relies on the senses to contact and discover the world. So even in that way, I feel like even children are creative lower than 3 years, while experimenting with their environment. and in that way they also have this creative capacity and creative consciousness, and that kind of multiplies into when you get older, you become more conscious and more aware because you're less restricted by your parents, because that during those years the parents are totally with you, everything is directed, and then I feel like you enter this kind of free will thing where the free will argument comes in. You enter into a contract with the society. So this social contract with, you can refer to Jack Rousseau for that one. When you enter the social contract is when this dichotomy between morality and ethics comes in. Because now you have to follow this ethical code for like the civilization, the society, how should I be in relation to another citizen? And then there's a morality, which is more individual in nature. So this distinction happens, and once you realize that there's ethics and there's morality, and then there's also logic somewhere here, you can creatively, navigate via imagination, your own models, and that way you're intelligent. And that's what makes you human, moreover. So it's definitely very, very cohesive. Like since you're also in the filmmaking industry, there's a lot of creativity that requires to direct a film, to get the specters of the image right and stuff like that. What have you because you created this amazing movie, The Tashkent Files, and it was very it seemed like you're a really good historian filmmaker. At least that's what came into my mind when I first saw the movie. You're very good at capturing, the instances and the narrative and everything. What inspired you? Were you directed at filming that particular kind of film? And what inspired you to make this trilogy, right? Because it's Tashkent Files, then Kashmir Files, and now Delhi Files.
Yeah, I don't know. I never planned it. There are two kinds of films you can make. There are two kinds of stories in this world floating around. One, the stories people want to hear. Okay, now people want to hear Ramayana, so you can tell them 100 times Ramayana, or Jesus Christ. You can tell that story 1,000,000 times. You can tell the story of Hitler billions of times. People want to hear that story. So you keep making films, basically what people want to hear. Okay, and people generally like to be in a comfort zone. They just want to hear the same thing again and again and again and again. Even when people fall in love, a couple, they want to hear I love you billions of times, because people want to be reassured with those stories. That's the utility of those stories.
True.
Then there are stories which people see something in a new perspective and they tell a new story. Right?
Yes.
So like when Ayn Rand started talking about individualism, okay, it was a new story, people were not used to it. When Socrates started telling new stories about democracy and why democracy is going to fail, people were not prepared and they said, no, kill this guy. So lots of people tell stories which people have not heard before. Sometimes they get excited, sometimes they get scared, sometimes, so people react to them. So that's why stories, when you will tell from your point of view, people will react to it. They'll get disturbed. Okay, so there came a time in my life I said I was making big films with big stars. It's easier to make films with big stars, because they sell. Then I said, why am I doing that? There was no advertisement saying wanted directors. I came with my own free will, if I may use the word free will here. It's a very controversial word these days.
True. Yes.
Because of the politics, it's suddenly into this thing.
You don't want to get into
Yeah, no. I don't want to get into religious politics. Any other politics I'm open to. So I came out of my own choice. Let me use that's a better word. So I chose to came here, and I said, why am I wasting time saying the same thing again and again? Okay, hero has to be like this, and the heroine has to be like this. So then I quit and I started teaching in Indian School of Business in Hyderabad, and I was teaching a module called I Am Buddha, which I created myself. Okay, I Am Buddha basically takes a lot of Indian philosophy and puts it together for global leadership. No. I said leadership is not going to be a template based. Then these 100 students who are coming out, all of them have learned the same thing about leadership. So leadership is something you go out in the world and experiment and figure out whether you're a leader or not. And from there this journey started, and I realized that there's so many stories to be told which are Indian, okay, and which have no resolution. They have not been resolved. So Shastri was one story, it's not been resolved.
Yeah.
Kashmir is a story, it's not been resolved. Now Delhi Files is a Punjab issue, it's not been resolved. So I said, why are we scared to make movies without climaxes? Why we are so fascinated with climaxes? That it has to be resolved, that somebody is good, somebody is bad, this. So I said, let's take these unresolved stories. They require a lot of research. So we got into researching, and that's how the journey started, And that's what we are doing. Kashmir Files also has no climax. In next film also has no climax, yeah.
Which is brilliant, because some movies, I feel like, and by the way, there's also this thing that psychoanalysis or the psychoanalytic movement that started
Yeah.
in the 18th century
Yeah.
was in very close relation with the film industry, because films are,
It started with Freud or Sartre?
I would say psychoanalysis with Freud.
Freud, yeah.
Yeah. With his most important book being Interpretation of Dreams in
Oh, yeah.
1900, yes. And so, so the film industry and psychoanalysis go hand in hand, because
How?
films,
Tell me how?
because films are truly able to capture the psychology of human condition and portray it moreover. So, there's so many films that I can talk about. Like you take films by, famous people, Martin Scorsese, or like any of their films, like maybe Inception, maybe The Shutter Island, and you see it from one perspective, but then you realize, no, there's another perspective because of the no climax thing. And so if the movie leaves you thinking in the end, the movie did its job. So that's what I believe in. Like a true movie, a true film is something that should leave the person thinking.
Yeah.
At least creatively for a good amount of time. And that's how, you will know that you directed a film that had an effect.
Yeah, and I realized it wasn't planned. I realized, see, in India there is a philosophy of drashya, darshak, and drashta. Okay, drashya means the scene, scenario, and darshak means the observer, the viewer, and drashta is a spiritual level where you observe yourself, observing something, it's a higher level. And I said, normally in movies, there is a gap between the scene and the observer. You are seeing it from outside. So if I ask you, what do you see when you look at a mirror? What do you see?
The reflection, I would say.
No, you don't. When you look at a mirror, you see the mirror. It's only when you look into the mirror, you see yourself.
True.
Right? So similarly, I said in these movies, the kind of I experimented with, that let the observer become the participant. You say, aha, okay, now let me see, this is how it should move forward. And when you start doing it, then the gap between the observer and the observed minimizes. And when that gap minimizes, that's when art begins.
Wow.
There is no art before that. There's no art. For example, अपने वो बंदर करते हैं ना, monkeys, drew,
Yeah.
and monkey से कहते हैं अच्छा बताओ जाओगे नहीं जाओगे. No, that's not an art. Why circus is not considered as art?
True. That's very true. No, I see
Right?
the distinction, yes.
It becomes art only when the guy who's painting, okay, or when Mozart is playing, he becomes those notes,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when the gap is reduced, that's when the art begins. So that's what I tried in Tashkent Files, where the audience becomes the participant, which means you just cannot leave the theater saying, aha, movie's over. Actually, movie has just begun, because when you are climbing down the stairs, when you're driving your car, you're saying, acha, what happened? Acha, this is how it should have been. You come to your own conclusions, you create your own climax. That's so, and I experimented. Everybody said this will not work. There was no songs, no comedy, no action, no violence, no conflict, no relationships. It was only dialogues in one room, some ugly old fat people sitting and just blah 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 blah, talking. It was so verbose. And it was complex things like politics, and not regular politics ki, okay, Hindu is bad and Muslim is good and all that shit, not like that. But it was complex politics, It was about Cold War, which most of the younger population doesn't even know anything about. It was about KGB, nobody knows about anything about it. So, but we took that chance.
Yeah.
And the reason it became the biggest hits of the last year is because people became the participants, and they took their story forward.
Yeah, they embodied the
Yeah,
narrative,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is how a film truly should.
It's called open-ended art. Some
Yes,
arts are
yes.
open-ended, so
Yeah.
this is
And it allows for more creativity both for the director and also for the
Yeah.
audience,
Yeah.
because it leaves both of them thinking as
Yeah.
to what really happened
Yeah.
here. So within like film, do you see any kind of, like within your trilogy specifically, there's always a philosophy and a psychology interplaying together, which plays on the minds of the audience and also on the part of the people who direct the film. So what would you say would be the interplay between philosophy and psychology within your movies?
I would say that in most of the cases, psychology comes first. Okay, the first thing is demographics. Okay, a movie without or any story without characters is not a it's nothing, limbo. Okay,
Yeah.
then it's an essay. So you have characters. Now characters, you have to say, okay, this person, what's the age of this person, lives in Mumbai, lives in London, where married, family, no family, etc., etc. Those are demographics, tall, short, all those kind of things. Then you get into the psychographics. Okay, and so why Bollywood films are criticized is because they never get into psychographics. They don't even care. Rich girl, that's it. Now all rich girls will behave in the same way. They'll take out a cigarette, drink beer, and modern and yuppie. That's how they look at this thing.
Yeah.
They don't get into psychographics. They just decide demographics. But you have to have psychographics. That's what makes a story interesting. That's when you get into psychology. So filmmakers are not psychologists, but they at instinct level they understand psychology. Okay, so you get into psychology of the character, and that's what determines the conflict of the film. Where your psyche is placed and where my psyche is placed, that's where the conflict comes in.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
That
and
is
without conflict there is no drama.
True.
There's no drama. There's no and without drama there is no story. Okay, and without conflict there is no drama. So you need conflict, which means two people have to go into opposing directions. Good, bad, evil, whatever you want to call it, or whatever, a husband and wife, a couple story. Okay, and say wife wants to migrate to America, and the husband doesn't want to because his parents are here. They are in love with each other, but the conflict begins.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but this is a very demographic conflict. This is not a psychological conflict.
It's a situational based.
Yeah,
Yes.
psychological conflict is very rarely done in Hindi films, and I would say Abhiman. I don't know if you know that film. Amitabh Bachchan and Jaya Bhaduri.
Okay.
Okay, so both are she's a singer from a village, not trained. Amitabh Bachchan is a very big singer, popular like Kishore Kumar, and he performs somewhere. He goes to a village, sees this girl, he hears her singing. He says, "Why don't you come to Mumbai?" And he gets married to her, brings her here, and says, "I'll make her a singer." And she starts singing, and she becomes so popular. Right now, he has a psychological problem. That movie, actually, you must see it. It's so beautifully done. One of the best psychological films, I would say. So that's what psychology comes in. Then, how do you resolve a film? It has to resolve. Conflict can't go on.
Yeah.
That's when philosophy comes in. Now, which philosophy is going to win in this conflict is what decides the resolution. Okay, a film can be resolved only when somebody has a philosophy. Okay, say somebody has a philosophy that everything is fine, easy going. This is how the world should be. It's a boundaryless world. That can be somebody's philosophy, and somebody can be fighting to protect that local area from invasion of government officers or something like that. So I think demographics, then psychology, and then philosophy. Now, how they operate in our writer's mind, I don't know. Anything can happen. Like, for example, in Kashmir Files.
Yeah.
Okay, philosophy came first to my mind. And then everything else worked reverse order. I never bothered about demographics. Okay, they were decided by the philosophy of the person. So the philosophy in my mind was right to justice. I said, is justice what you get in the court, or is justice a human nature?
True. That's a good distinction there. And that's very Platonic as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Platonic. Actually,
Yeah.
so is it the right to justice? The theme of the film is like Tashkent Files. The theme was right to truth, but we discovered this philosophy much later on. The whole thing started with that why this is not resolved. This is how it started. So demographics came first. There was a prime minister who was popular, who won elections. There was Cold War. These are all demographic things. Then when we picked up these 9 characters, then everybody had a different psyche. Everybody
Yes.
had different motive. They were doing it for different reasons. And that's why there was so much of conflict and you're arriving nowhere. Then came the philosophy that in a democracy, do we have a right to truth as the first fundamental principle? Right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
that was the order. In Kashmir Files, philosophy came first.
Yeah.
I said, all over the world, there are so many persecuted people, so many genocides, so many ethnic cleansings, so much of, I mean, this history of human beings is pathetic.
Yeah.
There has not been one single day when we had not been fighting wars.
True.
When you give arms to certain people, then everybody is weak in front of them. And then they do things at their will. So I said, what is justice? Are they fighting for justice like in Afghanistan, whatever is happening right now? Is Taliban fighting for justice? Or is America or these Western forces fighting for justice?
Yeah.
What is justice? So the theme of the film is what is justice? Even I don't know what is justice. I really don't know what is justice. Okay, but we explored it. So what happens is, then we got into psychographics. So philosophy, then came into psychoanalysis of these things. And then from different characters are probing what is justice.
Wow.
Then you have various points of view on justice. Okay, and now let the audience decide
What the answer?
and with this film, nobody is going to say, okay, I'm going to follow this person's point of view, this person's point of view. People will go back and it triggers your own psyche. So your subconscious level, everything will come out and you will say, okay, let me figure out for myself what is justice. Okay, I'm not saying that the film is going to give justice to people or people will suddenly become pro-justice. But one thing is for sure, that it will for some time focus you on justice. So in that way, it is dealing with your psyche,
Yes.
not philosophy.
Yeah. It's very creative because it allows you to critically think.
Yeah.
And that's a best execution.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Sanjana, there's a very thin line between psychology and philosophy, but they're so interrelated. And my biggest regret with this world is, my complaint with this world is, I think philosophy and psychology should be compulsory all over the world. Same philosophy and same psychology, not hundreds different schools and politically correct things. All over the world, so that the entire humanity understands at least one thing in the same way like they understand mathematics.
True. So like one kind of social science which is like fundamental and same across.
Yeah,
and across.
because ultimately you don't spend your life living like an engineer or like a president or a clerk. You ultimately live your life. Then how to live life? That's why, see, why there is so much a problem in this world is because people don't understand their own psychology. They don't understand your psychology. We are such a repressed society. Let me give you one example. It's a bold example, but such a correct example. I'll tell you where the problems of the world begin. Why this world is so perverted. It's sexual repression. You are a student of psychology, so you have to agree, you have no option.
Yeah.
Okay,
Freudian, very
Freudian.
yes.
So it begins from there. Now a child plays with his eyes like this, no parent objects. He puts his hand in his ear, nobody objects. The minute he touches his sexual parts,
Yeah.
a 9-month-old child, mother goes and does this. Don't do that. All across the world. Okay? He starts fearing his own sexual organs, which actually, if you believe in the yoga, in the Kundli hierarchy, everything begins from there. And because he is so scared to address his sexual kundli, that he can never ever, he is never being able to rise above that.
Yeah.
Because he is not addressed A for apple, how will you reach X, Y, Z? And that's why most of the world is stuck in that perversion. Most of the things people do, you know that in psychology, that everything is done out of that sexual force.
Yes. Drive.
Isn't it?
Yes.
And all love, all empathy, all good things in the world actually begin from there.
Yes, it definitely begins from this Freudian concept of
If you read these modern psychology, this lady, what's her name? Lisa Brett, I don't know what's her name. She's Eric's very good friend. She has written a book, 7.5 Emotions or something. and she's very respectable person, highly credible, and she's saying that everything else is crap. Whatever we do in life is because of either metabolism or your reproduction. That these are the only two things your mind knows. So your mind is making best guesses around these two things.
Very true.
Okay, so what you call intelligence is actually coming from there. So it's very important to address these two things, and that's your mind knows. Mind doesn't know what is empathy or what is good. It's just making guesses for survival.
Yes. So metabolism and reproduction would be the biological basis of psychology. So that's what actually Sigmund Freud was doing.
Yeah, that's what he was doing.
Yeah, and like so I created like a triad of psychoanalysis to better understand the analytical part of psychology. Just not psychology, because people think that psychology is just like one thing, but psychology has like branches, like cognitive psychology, then there's psychoanalysis, then there's all the other different kinds, which are mostly modern. But within that triad, the main basis is biological. So as Freud created 18th, 19th century, then Carl Jung comes here because he took a very collective view of psychology in general. He created collective unconscious. He said that myths and the history of an individual, via across like all ages, also have a deep impact on our unconscious mind. So one can think of it in a way that it's not only biological, but it's also metaphysical or mystical. So that's the kind of psychology he kind of concocted. And then there's this guy called Jacques Lacan. And he was more the unconscious is structured like language, so psychology, but language based. So if one is to take all of these three things together, that's what psychoanalysis essentially is. At least a perfect triad of psychoanalysis. So we have biological basis, as you were saying, metabolism and reproductory needs that kind of facilitate us. And then we have our mystical kind of thinking as to why are we here, ontology. We have that kind of psychical basis. And then language, which is the prime connector of, the tribal consciousness, as you were mentioning. So it's definitely very interesting.
And let me tell you this, Freud, because the Western world published books and they formalized everything, but if you know in yoga, Patanjali, have you heard of Patanjali, the father of yoga, who put all the yoga sutras together? It's called Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So yoga, as is being misunderstood by people, is definitely not about asana. It has nothing to do with these exercises. Absolutely not. Exercises are just a couple of 100 years old. Whereas this is about 4,000-5,000 years old. So the entire, just to give you the gist of it, just to summarize it for you, the entire yogic science is about, it says your mind is like a lake or a pond. If you throw a stone, then there are ripples all around. There are ripples. So you get angry and there are ripples in your mind.
True.
You fall in love, there are ripples in your mind. You lose your job, there are ripples in your mind. So what we are doing is, all our lives, we are basically addressing the ripples.
Yes.
We are never addressing what is causing those ripples.
True.
This is called vritti. In Sanskrit, it's called vritti. So when these ripples, so yoga is about getting rid of these vrittis, which means reaction to any stimuli.
Yeah, okay. Now I see it. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And second thing is this whole concept of meditation, that sit like this and all that. This is all, it's okay. Yeah. That's not what they talk about. Asana means the most comfortable position. So a human objective, the mind wants to get into the most comfortable position.
Oh yes, true.
Right? But because of these reproductive and metabolic reasons, your mind is always surrounded by ripples. Because it's animal instincts that the tiger is going to come, where will I get the food from? So greed, so that possess, I have 2 apples, so one is for lunch, one is for dinner, she has come, she should not steal it. All that, so that's how your mind is making guesses whether she's going to steal it or not. No, she's not going to steal it, so I'm going to love her. And your vibes are telling me you are definitely going to take my apple, so I am angry with you, or I hate you, or I'm insecure with you. So once you understand this, then you can get rid of all those kind of things. But what is happening is that human society has repressed the cause. what Freud has arrived much later, that
Yeah,
sex
yeah.
is the cause, and you are repressing it. And that's why all the problems are manifested because of that repression.
True, true.
You got it?
Yeah.
So in yoga they say the same thing. And this whole theory about get out of your comfort zone is bullshit. You know, it's actually crap.
Yeah.
Actually, you should get into the most comfortable position.
Yes, yes. No, I agree there. 100%. Yeah.
You should be in your comfort state.
Yeah.
Only when you are most comfortable, then you are rid of anger and all these things.
Yes, yes. You find your own position.
Yeah. And because we are pushing people to get into discomfort zone all the time, and why we want them to be in discomfortable position? Why? Because if a soldier becomes comfortable, how will you win wars? If a corporate slave becomes comfortable, then how will you make those 600% profits?
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, these flies. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but yeah, that's very true. Like I was also going through, like Aldous Huxley was a really, phenomenal philosopher, also psychedelic researcher and stuff like that. He gave a speech in Berkeley about the weaponization of psychology. That how, like Hitler back in the day was using his voice and the mechanism of media and communication to mass, kind of take people's mind towards places where it hasn't gotten ever. So make them violent via the, capacity of language manipulation. So using language in a way that can have an instinctual effect on others that is far beyond anyone's capacity in general. So, that kind of like, so you can use psychology in that way. Like you can either learn psychology and follow it the way it is, or you can learn it and learn to manipulate it, which is weaponization. But one can also manipulate
Everybody
it
has used it for weaponization, mostly,
Very true.
And fear psychosis is the easiest thing. Easiest thing. You tell somebody, oh, there is fear, and everybody gets activated because these are animal instincts.
Yeah.
And very often people say human beings are very intelligent, blah, 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 blah. But at some level, we have not really evolved. Actually, have we evolved? Tell me. What was happening in Buddha's time or Jesus Christ's time is still happening. The same thing is happening now.
Yes.
Let me give you a very simple example. Let me give you a very simple example. How do we walk?
With our two legs.
And we move our hands.
Yes.
Why do we have to move our hands?
It seems like a voluntary behavior.
No. No, it's conditioning of your mind which you have not got rid of, because when we were animals we used to walk on four legs, so one would go like this, one would go like that, and we still are going on with that. Nobody ever bothered. Okay, try a simple trick. You do it actually. You walk tomorrow morning without moving your hands. Suddenly your mind will become calm.
Yeah.
Try it actually try it.
Yeah.
You walk for 15 minutes with your hands in your pocket or without moving them, suddenly your consciousness will become different, your focus will be on your mind. Okay, when you're moving hands like this, you're always prepared to survive for somebody's attacking. We are going, like that.
Yeah.
It's a waste of energy. It's got no utility absolutely. It's not even aerodynamics. It's only when you're running, I understand.
So, like when I was explaining like the weaponization of psychology with Hitler, same can be reversed, right? People can optimize their own psychology, and that's when you try to see the limits of your own mind. So one thing that I often tell people is sit down with a pen and paper, just like Descartes did back in the day, and observe everything around you. Make your own models. What is truth? What is reality? What is my environment? How do I feel in relation to my environment? What is an object? Where is my imagination coming from? But like construct your own models instead of following others. Like instead of, as you were referring to before, like quoting people and referencing things. That's the thing that I see within the philosophical circle a lot. The second-hand literature culture, I would call it.
Yeah.
People are not...
I call it window shopping.
Exactly. Yeah. People are not creating their own philosophies. And so it seems as if philosophy in general throughout the Western and also here in East is stuck. There's nothing new happening because people think they've figured it out. But we've never figured it out. There's always that one mystery of that one objective truth. and like so many other mysteries that have so many theories. So like I always tell people to just sit down and make their own models, which is pure creation. And hilariously enough, my name also means creator.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
why I
yeah.
recognize myself as a creator, because I
Yeah.
feel like I'm better at doing the more creative aspects of things. So like, what is the message that you would give to the to the younger people for being creative, for staying ahead in life, and also just navigating through life,
See, first of all, I think the most important thing is to understand your aloneness. Okay, aloneness, not loneliness, aloneness. But in modern world, aloneness has become such a scary thing. But alone word is coming from all one. All one means all one means whatever, everything is one. And another thing is, this is where one reason why I really like Shiva's philosophy is, you heard of concept of Trinetra, third
Yeah,
eye of
third
Shiva,
eye, yes.
right?
Yeah.
So third eye of Shiva is I think such a evolved philosophy. It should be taught to everybody. Um, your right brain looks at left brain looks at right,
Yeah.
right brain controls left hand, left brain controls right
Yeah.
hand. Your left hand is weaker than your right hand if you are a right hander,
Yeah.
isn't it? And so people are generally lopsided. People are either to right, in political terms also, right or left, because it's a tribal consciousness. We are always need division, that this is good, that is bad. If in India, I don't know about the West, but in India definitely, if child starts writing with the left hand, then parents start hitting him, they tie their hands, they put
Yeah.
some mirchi and spices in his hand so that you don't write with the left hand. They believe that right hand is the best hand.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have converted this world into either yin or yang,
Yes.
either feminine or masculine.
Duality.
Duality.
Yes.
So we are always fighting with that. But Trinetra is when left and right become one. Okay, that's when your third eye opens, and everybody is born with third eye. So these are functional eyes. This
Yes.
eye has a certain function. This eye has a certain function.
Yeah.
Okay, but when both of them do for the same purpose, then you have the third eye. That is balancing. And which is why you'll see all ancient arts, be it kung fu or yoga or whatever arts are there in the world, physical arts, all of them have balancing exercises. All of them are about balance and coordination.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the biggest problem with the world is that it's imbalanced, and because of the imbalance, there is no creativity. So that is part one. Okay, now I'll tell you part two, and I'll connect that. And the second part is the cosmic dance of Shiva, which is called the Tandav Nritya.
Yes.
If you go outside the atomic center in Switzerland, the first statue outside is Shiva in his cosmic dance. Why? Why have they picked up that pose of Shiva and not him sitting like this? Because the cosmic dance of Shiva is what we discovered after thousands and thousands of years, a branch of science called quantum physics.
Oh wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
in quantum physics, earlier they thought, okay, here's a particle. Let me make it simple. Here's a particle. This particle is here. So I see the particle, it's here. But quantum physics figured out, I'm seeing this particle here, but actually this particle is not here. It's somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, when I think it's somewhere else, it's here. So when you are there, you are not there. When you are not there, you are there. Which means earlier it was just a straight line. Okay, but then say it's also a wave. Particle is also a wave. It's not just a particle, it's also a wave.
It's also
So, right? Which means what you are seeing is not actually what is there.
Yes.
And what is there, you are not seeing. It's complex. That's why I'm trying to make it simple. So let's forget science. Let's come back to philosophy. So similarly, in Shiva's Tandav Nritya, in his cosmic dance, when Shiva is there, he's not there. Shiva is not there. He's there.
Yeah, I see it.
You understand?
Yeah, I completely see it. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now let's make it simpler. What does this mean? That when he's creating, at the same time, Shiva is destroying. And when he's destroying, he's creating. So creation and destruction are one actually. You can't see them as two different things.
Oh yeah.
Every single, right now as we are talking, new cells are being formed in your body, but at the same time they are also destroying old cells. So if nature is so smart, if nature is so smart, okay, but human mind either constructs or destructs. We think these are two different things, but they are not. They are the same process. And when you understand that, that's when you find your Trineth and you become Shiva. Then you become God. And that's exactly what I told you in the beginning. Thou art that. You are that God. Which God are you looking at? And if you are really an intelligent person, you should keep destroying these gods all the times and keep creating new gods for yourself.
Yes, that's very beautiful. Yes.
So this is what I actually practice. I'm not just preaching. This is what I practice. I believe in, and that's why my mind is so open. See, normally you can't see beyond this. You can't see your own hands here.
Yes.
This is your limits. This is your limit. This is how limited we are.
Yeah. The 180 degree.
We have no awareness besides this.
Yeah.
That's why when you are fully aware, as I am talking to you, I am also fully aware of what's happening in my body, what's happening to each pore of mine, and what is happening with these boys without looking at them, what's happening behind me, what's happening outside.
Yeah.
And as you expanding it, I'm not saying we are superhumans, but we also become part of a huge cosmic awareness, small part, but yet a part. Otherwise, you are not even a part. You are just lying there outside without any control over it. That's creative consciousness.
That's extremely beautiful. Like, by the way, your point of like seeing something but you're not actually seeing something, it's so there's a neuroscientist called Anil Seth, and his book Being You, his main thesis.
I have not read this book. Okay.
You should definitely.
Okay, I will.
I highly
Now
recommend.
I will. Yeah.
Because its thesis is essentially that we always have controlled hallucinations. So whatever we're perceiving, let's say if this is an object, is not what it really looks like, because it's our imagination which is rendering the image of this object.
Yeah.
So again, one of the points that you made earlier, about imagination constructing the reality.
Yeah.
And that's also what Sartre talks about in his imaginary.
Yeah.
So it's actually perceptual consciousness that can maybe, like at least in what I think for now, and what is shared amongst many intellectuals at the moment, is that maybe the perceptual consciousness or sensory modalities can solve the hard problem of consciousness, which is why you have your subjective reality, I have my subject, like you have your own narrative, I have my own narrative. And so this thing that you were talking about, it's completely like in thesis now people are talking about, because it makes all the sense that there is an external physical reality which is not accessible to us.
Yeah.
And also about your point of reaching stability. I would call it homeostatic psychosomaticism. So like stable mind and body would open your third vision. And like this third vision is also kind of like connected to Descartes' pineal gland and Egyptians and stuff like that. So it's very creative, your model of creative consciousness. Thank you so much for coming in. I really enjoyed this conversation because it was thorough and it was real.
Okay. So when you say thank you, okay, it has got no meaning unless I accept it. Okay. So I'll accept it only if you make one promise.
Okay.
Whenever you are in Bombay, come and do a podcast. It's great talking to you because you're a very smart, bright mind,
you so much,
and you want to learn. That's the best thing. And you didn't give me any vibes that yes, I know. So
I don't know. First principle.
I don't know. That's my principle too.
Yeah.
Good. Good. That's when the creativity begins.
That's exactly when the creativity begins.
We don't know.
We don't know anything.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, though.
Thank you, Sanjana.